Ladies and gentlemen, students, friends, I'm going to talk to you about how to end the world's worst human rights scandal and to stop violence against women. Now, I'm going to start by showing you a picture. Now, this is a picture of Jamila. And Jamila is an Afghan girl. She was 16 years old when I met her in the women's prison in Kabul in July 2003. She was 16 at that time, and that prison had about 175 women, some of them girls like Jamila, and they were there because they wanted to marry the man of their choice, because they were running away from cruel husbands, or because they had been accused of adultery. Now, Jamila told me that at the age of 15, a year earlier, she had been abducted from her father's home in Kunduz by a man who wanted to marry her. She didn't want to marry him, but he forced her to go through a marriage ceremony and then abused her and raped her. She ran away. The police found her, brought her back. She was abused even more. And when this man's uncle tried to rape her, she ran away again. And this time, the police brought her to the prison. And that's where I saw her. And she said to me, all I want to do is go home to my parents, but I'm afraid that my father will kill me because I have spoiled the family somehow. And now, Jamila's fear wasn't unfounded, because that same year, just before the Amnesty International delegation had arrived, President Karzai had released 20 similar women, and a number of them disappeared, presumably killed by their families. Now, the next picture I'm going to show you this is in Mexico, in a city called Ciudad Juarez, which is on the border of Mexico and the US, just a few hundred meters away from El Paso, Texas. This city of Ciudad Juarez has become a center of industry of the maquiladoras, which are assembly plants, Canadian, US assembly plants, which use the tax benefits in Mexico to produce various products. And many women from the poorest parts of Mexico come to work in the maquilas. They work hard during the day, they go to night school because these are women who want to improve their lives. And many of them, on their way home from work or from school, disappear in the dark alleys. Hundreds of them have disappeared. Bodies have been found afterwards, raped, mutilated, in terrible condition. This is a place, as a parking lot, empty parking lot, where 11 bodies were found, one after the other, over a period of months. And it has now become a shrine for the mothers of Ciudad Juarez. And I went there first in 2003, that's when this picture was taken. I've gone back several times to Ciudad Juarez. But I remember this first event very clearly because one of the women standing at the back, one of the mothers said to me, she had lost her daughter Norma, who was about 18 years old, and she said to me, you know, the police couldn't even take our complaint. They don't listen to us. We don't count because we have no clout. And yet these women were feeding the global economy. They were creating value for us, but they themselves had no value. This next picture was taken in a refugee camp in Darfur, in Sudan. And there I went to collect testimony from women and men who were living there in the camps about the conditions in which they were living. The men told me they were too afraid to go out of the camp because the Janjaweed militia would kill them. The women said to me they were also afraid to go out of the camp, but they had to go out because they had to collect firewood. And of course they were being attacked and raped. So they were sending younger women, girls, out because they thought the girls could run fast. But of course, many of these girls didn't run fast enough. I found it very difficult to get girls to talk to me about what had happened to them because they were being ostracized and stigmatized. The medical workers in the camp said they didn't even record the cases because even recording them would create problems for the girls. So Afghanistan, Mexico, Darfur, these are all faraway places. These terrible things happen there. Far away. Not where we live. Do they? Do you know know that here in the UK, every 2 minutes of the day, a woman is making a phone call because she feels threatened by violence. She's either calling the emergency services or from social services or from health centers, every 2 minutes in the day. Do you know that in the United States, 1 in 3 women are threatened with sexual assault? Or that in Switzerland, women are safer on the streets than in their homes, partly because police won't respond to a call from a home while they will if a woman gets assaulted on the street. Worldwide, do you know that the highest risk factor for women between the ages of 15 and 44 is not cancer, it's not traffic accidents, it's not malaria, it's actually domestic violence and rape. Look at the figures, they speak for themselves. So from sex-selective abortion, even before birth, to female infanticide, to female genital mutilation, to dowry deaths, acid attacks, bride burning, rape as a weapon of war, domestic violence, sexual harassment at work, you name it. Right throughout, from conception to death, women are subject to violence. Calculate the economic cost, the development cost, the human cost of that problem. And think about how much attention we give to it. Now, why does it happen on such a scale, and why does it persist? I would say for 3 reasons. Inequality, impunity, and apathy. There are too many countries where the laws and policies discriminate against women. There are too many governments that turn a blind eye to what is happening. Too many police forces that don't arrest. Too many court systems that don't prosecute and convict. But there is also, too often, laws, customs, traditions, religion used to condone violence. And very often, we turn a blind eye to that, and that's our apathy. So between impunity, inequality, and apathy, the problem continues. But I haven't come to talk here just about the problem. I also want to tell you about what's happening to change this terrible situation. Now, when you think about human rights, that's what you think. That's the picture you have. You don't think of a woman being battered at home as a human rights problem. Now, that's the big idea. That's changing the issue. This is not a social problem, not just a social problem, it's actually a human rights problem. And why do I say violence against women is a human rights problem? Because all of us, men or women, have the right to be safe. I think this is going too fast. Has the right to be safe. We all have the right to physical integrity. And we have that right whether we are out in the street, whether we are at the police station, or whether we are in our homes. So a woman doesn't lose her rights when she's in her house. She has to be protected as much from being beaten by a policeman or by being beaten by her boyfriend. You are not allowed to chop off your daughter's fingers. So why do you believe that your custom, your tradition, your religion allows you to chop off her genitalia? Human rights are universal, and therefore no national law, no custom, no tradition, no religion can be an excuse for any government, because human rights are part of the international system of values that make you and me equal. And that's the message that has to be spread. Rights empower women, but rights also put responsibilities, obligations, duties on others. And that is why it is so important to see violence against women as a human rights problem. And that is why in March 2004, when I was head of Amnesty International, we launched a global campaign to stop violence against women. More than 40 years after the world's largest human rights organization was born, did that organization recognize violence against women as a human rights scandal. The opening ceremony in London was attended by Patrick Stewart, the actor. He came, he was with me, and he talked about his own childhood and how he grew up witnessing his mother as a victim of domestic violence in their household. He was then playing Othello, and he talked about how when we see Othello, we think of Othello's jealousy, What we don't see is Desdemona as the abused woman. So whether you look at history, culture, literature, you see this hidden scandal which is now being exposed, and it is being exposed thanks actually to the work of women. And that brings me to the second idea. One is to recognize violence against women as a human rights problem, and second is to recognize women themselves as agents of change. And where we see change happening, it's happening because of these women themselves. Even the issue of violence against women being put on the human rights agenda was actually done by women's groups and women's movements. Here I am in Kenya, in Nairobi, in the world's largest slum, in Kibera, where 1 million people live in a slum in the heart of Nairobi. And in that slum, you can imagine the kind of violence that women face, whether they are walking home at night, whether they're going out to the toilets, whether they're going to get water, at every step. And women's groups have got together to create support systems for themselves and to give support to other women, to create systems that protect these women from violence. The next one, I hope, is this is in southern Zimbabwe. In southern Zimbabwe, this is an organization called Women of Zimbabwe Arise. And this group of women had walked 8 hours across the countryside to come and meet with me and to talk about how they are organizing themselves in a society which is extremely oppressive, a very repressive society, a very closed society, to work together to empower themselves through education, through employment, to change the situation of women and girls in Zimbabwe. And the next picture is in Bangladesh, in my own country. And here, this is a group of women who had come together it was a microcredit scheme where they had come together to receive small grants which would allow them to set up small businesses. And this is a legal education class where these women who don't know how to read and write were being taught by a teacher using other types of tools, posters, visuals. They were being taught about their rights. And in this particular class, they were learning about the law that exists against child marriage. And this particular woman had borrowed money to buy a small sewing machine to set up her business. So I asked her, I said, why are you here? What do you think you can learn from this class? And she said to me, I didn't know my rights. And that is why I am where I am. I want to learn what the rights are of women in this country so that my daughters will not have to suffer the way I have suffered. Now this was one woman's voice. Women individually are doing fantastic things, but it is not so much individual women. It's the collective voice of women that's making a difference. In this particular organization, BRAC reaches out to about 30 million people, most of them women, providing them with microfinance, but also with education, health, and employment that then helps them to change their lives. And that's the way women are changing their lives. That's empowerment of women. And it is fundamental. It's happening across the world. I could give you many, many examples, but I'm limited by time here, as you know. Then there is, even in Ciudad Juarez, we talked about Ciudad Juarez earlier. I went back, as I told you, I went back several times, and each time I went back, I saw those women organizing themselves, and the solidarity that international organizations provided to them, Amnesty International, as well as other organizations, provided to them, gave them strength to stand up to the local government, to stand up to the state government, and even to stand up to the president of Mexico, until he actually appointed a special prosecutor. And he brought in forensic experts from Argentina to investigate some of those cases. So those women organized themselves with support from outside to create the network then that is now bringing change in their lives. So you have violence against women being recognized as a human rights problem. You have the empowerment of women. But alongside empowerment must also come the accountability of the state. Because where there are rights and rights holders, there have to be duty bearers. And this brings me to the third part of the great idea. And that is about how do you make states accountable, governments accountable for women's rights, for protecting women's rights. Good governance is a term that is used very often these days, but it's not only about fighting corruption. It's actually about ensuring that the state is ready and able and willing to protect the rights of all its citizens, men or women. And this brings me to my current organization, the International Development Law Organization that I'm now heading, and the work that we are doing to strengthen the rule of law and human rights in countries like Afghanistan. I started with Afghanistan, I want to end with Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, IDLO, the organization for which I now work, has a program, a judicial and legal reform program, where they have set up violence against women units in the Attorney General's office in Kabul, and in 24 of the 26 provinces now, there are special units that deal with gender complaints, from forensics to witness protection, to providing all sorts of assistance so women can make complaints. But that is not enough. We have established a legal aid service right throughout the country that would then help defend women. And that is also not enough. So we have done judicial training of judges, but also of lawyers, and particularly of women lawyers. Afghanistan now has women lawyers who are being trained to be able to help victims of gender violence. Now that's an amazing progress. Amazing progress compared to where we were in Afghanistan. 700 prosecutions have now been brought over the last 3 years since the system has been working. Now 700 prosecutions may seem very little compared to the size of the problem, but this is a country where the notion of rights is in a very early stage, and the notion of women's rights has not been there at all. And in that kind of a situation, to get them to begin to understand within their cultural context that protection of women is important is quite an amazing thing. So I am planning to go back to Kabul later this year, because I would like to go back to that prison, which I visited in 2003, and I would like to look Jamila in the eye again if she is there, or if there is another Jamila, and say that perhaps we cannot help you, we were not able to help you, but there are others who may have a different life from yours. Now, the thought that I want to leave with you is, are you able and ready and willing to look Jamila in the eye? In economics, we learn about demand and supply. Where there is demand, supply is created. There is a demand and supply of justice as well. If you demand justice, if you organize yourself and you demand justice, then the supply of justice, which is the institutions, the states, the governments, begin to work better. You here represent that demand of justice. You can represent that demand of justice. If you stand up and you demand change, if you demand that your government doesn't cut overseas development assistance, that your authorities don't cut down on social services, that support is given to women's groups, you are creating the demand that will then create the supply on the other side. So each one of us have within us the possibility to end violence against women. It lies in our hands. We don't have to look at Jamila, we have to look at women like this, who are smiling because their lives have changed, because they have helped themselves, but they have also had the support and solidarity from around the world. Thank you.